Hi, welcome to TheatreCast, presented by the EdReach Network, giving educators a voice, a big voice. You've reached episode number 56, being recorded May 18th, 2014. I'm sorry. We're going to try this all over again.
Where are we?
Welcome to TheatreCast, presented by the EdReach Network, giving educators a voice, a big voice. You've reached episode number 56, being recorded June 1st, 2014. This is the show where theater teachers and professionals share their passions for theater trends, share practical advice and tips, and ask questions of some of theater's most innovative collaborators. I'm one of your hosts, Nick Cusumano, a theater teacher in St. Louis, Missouri, and joining me is my cohort in crime.
Hi, I'm Danielle Filas. Good to see you guys again.
And so this week we, in perfect timing because I'm also in the same situation as the title of our show. It's selecting a theater season. And so we're going to talk about some of the different ways of selecting a season, and actually we're going to talk a little bit about the beginning of, maybe some of you are new to the process of producing shows and what's the first step of that. So we're going to touch on that just for a little bit, and then we'll talk about, finding the right type of show, looking at your talent base, all those type of things that you need to think about before you go, oh, this is our season this year. So one thing, if you are new to the process, so you've been hired, signed your contract, you are now a theater teacher, and first of all, congratulations to get your rest now because your first year is a doozy. And your 19th year could be a doozy too, I think. But definitely your first
I was going to
year.
say, and then it gets, slightly better.
Yeah. Some things you know how to anticipate for, and some things will come from left field, and that's life. But first off is you can't just, unless you're doing public domain shows, you have to pay someone to produce it. One, you have to pay them for copies of the script, and two, you have to pay them royalties. And so the process of that is, once you've decided on a show you want to produce, you have to get in contact with the play publisher. Now, a lot of them, what you can do now is you can do this all online, and you don't even have to talk to a human being for the most part. Sometimes you do, depending on the show. Musicals probably are blocked out a lot more than straight shows, just because they could be touring more than others. And that's just one of those things that you have to anticipate for. So what you'll do is, and a good resource to go to is findaplay.com, and that's run by playscripts.com, but you know that maybe you want to do Chapter 2 by Neil Simon. Well, where are you going to, who has the rights for that? Well, I can do a Google search, that's one way, but sometimes rights change and it depends on the timing. So if you go to findaplay.com, you can put that in there, and then it'll tell you who owns the rights. And normally, the two big play publishers of straight shows are Samuel French, which are our good friend.
Friend of the show.
Friend of the show who shared some great resources, and go back to listen to that show for some ideas if you need some. And she gave some great ones for high schools to do. Which I will be going back through that list, but and I'll touch on that later. And one other dramatist, they hold a lot of the big well-known titles. They're big play publishing houses. So they own some popular titles. So you then, if you're doing amateur, what's in the book is normally what they'll charge you. It also depends on the size of your
I was
house.
going to say, sometimes you might have a really big theater, and it means that you get bumped up to the next pay
And
level.
there are some ways that you can. Okay, let's say that I have a 900-seat theater, but I only sell 100 tickets per show. If you give them a number, I will not sell past this point. They'll usually work with you on that, and then they'll base your royalty on that. And that may take a phone call just to talk with them. Like, well, I wish I could have 900 people here for this little teeny tiny show that no one's heard of, but I'm not going to get it, and I don't want to pay that extra price. So they'll work with you. You just have to limit your seats that are sold to that, or the number of tickets. And usually, and it depends on the publishing house, but like 450 is the break, um, for the most part. Um, Sometimes what you can ask also, and it depends, if you are producing for a thespian festival or you're doing a matinee for senior citizens, I do that at my school. You can ask for a waiver or a discount because you're not charging tickets or proceeds for that. And so, like when I do a musical, instead of paying normally for me, performance per night is like $400 to $500 in royalties. They'll only charge me 75 to 125 for that free performance. So look at the ways that you can, it's trying to make the budget stretch. And if you're not charging admission for that night, then go ahead and ask for that. See if they'll give you either a waiver or the discounted price.
And I think what we said before about how often you don't have to talk to a person. If you have a special case like that, or if you're looking for ways to make your budget go further, then calling and talking to them and telling them where you are is probably going to get you more wheat sown than you would if you just did it through the electronic means.
And if you're a professional house or
semi-pro or amateur,
semi-pro, non-equity, professional, whatever you want to call that in between, then your royalties, it kind of depends, and you're going to have to work with house because sometimes the publishing house, because sometimes then it's like 9 or 10% of your intake, and then you have to do your finances not different, but then you have to send them reports and that type of thing in. And I haven't done the other end on just working through my way. I, of course, talked with people, but where I've been in charge of it, I haven't dealt with that type of stuff. But I've talked to enough people, and that's what happens most of the time is they get a take of the house. And that goes back to paying royalties to the playwrights because, it's part of that process. And you need to also be sure that you've ordered enough scripts for that, at least the number of people in your show. And that part's, you still have to order them people per show, but, and I think probably in the next 5 years, I'm sure that this is going to turn upside down, or how you get your script. You're going to still have to pay someone for the script for you.
I think it's different with non-musicals already. The non-musicals, it's been a while since I've had to be in charge of dealing with the royalties and publishing fees and things like that. But usually it's just first night is like $50 and every night after is 10, and they don't really care how you get your scripts. So a lot of actors might already have them.
And that part kind of depends. Like they can check on you on that. Some of those. Like one time, I think I had to send an email or something because they are more of a sticklers because that's the way they can make money. Because if they don't have a record of your group doing that, then
and songs too, with even if it's a non-musical, like the Happy Birthday song, for instance. If there's, even if it's written into the script and you've paid your you've paid your royalty and you've got it cleared, you've got your program just how they want it, because of course they make you put with Samuel French or dramatists or wherever, but even if there's a song, that doesn't mean that you got the royalties to that song too. And I know more than a few playhouses that have been in trouble with that. So anytime there's a song, you better check it out.
Yeah, and sometimes they'll have that included in the fee. It's just an additional
ask.
Ask. Yeah. And they'll advertise that in that. Like Almost Maine sells you some of the music, and that's you pay an additional fee, but then you get the rights to play that, and they even send you the CD.
Yeah, and I think when we did 42nd Street, you could get some of the costumes and some of the set pieces as well. If you worked out a package deal with them.
Yeah, and that's just being resourceful. So just think about those things, and I'm going to take like 3 minutes because I think it's sometimes people need to know to understand. And they don't really teach it to you in college, but that's how schools work, or at least public schools. Yours may be different, Danielle, since you work for a private school. A lot of stuff in schools work on things which are called purchase orders. And really that's getting a permission to spend ahead. I guess it's like, I'm going to spend this much on this, and so it's got to go through the proper channels in your school district. Your principal, the financial person at district office, and say, oh, okay, you have this much money in your account, and it's like it puts it in an escrow if you've sold a house, so it's like, oh, this money's spoken for, you can't use it, or you can use it, but only for this, and so then you get a bill and you turn that into your financial person, and then they get that, and then it goes to the board and gets paid. So then they know what's coming their way. All the money's tracked. And that's a little something to get used to. If you're used to working on your own in the professional group, they may give you a corporate card, or you reimburse yourself, or you have a back and forth where you turn a receipt in and someone writes you a check. But where they go, oh, you can write it off on your taxes. But that's just something you kind of need to understand out there. So usually what I would suggest at the beginning of the show is take the time and budget out what you think you're going to spend, and then write your purchase orders for that, put a little cushion in there, just in case you need to get something different. So then that helps you through that process, because to operate correctly, you have to have all that information, and the school's not going to just say, oh, here's $50, go buy something. Or at least my school's not going to do that. They're going to want to do the back and forth. So then that's a little bit of searching on vendors. So there may be some places that I would have used, but I have to go with a place that accepts purchase orders. Which, it is what it is. So, but more and more schools are having corporate cards, but there's still that process of, I'm wanting to spend this much.
You have to write a requisition or something. Yeah.
So that's your little lesson what a purchase order is. And then if you don't use all that amount, then it becomes unencumbered and goes back into your account as funds that you may use. So just a little bit on how that process works. And where we were, so that's getting the royalties, and I think we've touched on most of that. Did I leave anything out?
Business aspects. No, I think that's about it. And there are other ways to get scripts too. Perhaps more so if you're in an amateur or semi-pro, non-educational outfit. You can also do a call for scripts, and we've done that and had some great scripts. Jacob Appel out there, man, he writes some good stuff. And then you have to work out with the author, perhaps directly, what you'll do as far as royalties or a stipend to the playwright. And what's really cool about doing that is that often you can really work with them. So if a line isn't working, or if there's language in it that won't work for you, you can get the author or the playwright say, yes, you can change that, or how about this line, and that sort of thing. So it's another way to do it, and it's I think it's one that's not very often explored. It does require that you wade through, if you do a call for scripts, that you wade through a lot of scripts out there. One way you can kind of hone that down is to have some requirements. Essentially, planning a season for an educational theater program is akin, I think, to planning a season for a repertory theater company, because I think you've got to mix. You've got to consider the bodies that you've got. So it wouldn't do to have, I don't know, I'm blanking, a Clifford Odets play if you haven't the people to do it. And so you sort of have to think about that. If you've got a ton of young women, which most educational theater programs do, then one must think of that. And then I think the onus on educational theater then is also to give the kid, it's much more important to give the kids an education, really, than it is to put on terrific stopping shows. So
or try to pick a show to pack the house, too.
Right.
Because you want to expose them to various types of literature, or genres, or serious and dramatic, and
it's all about a balance. I mean, that's kind of the buzzword, but if you're doing that, you can require then. So if you're putting together a season and say you've got your classic and you've got that, and you know what your rep company is, what kids you have, you can say playwrights. Maybe you say local only, so that you can work with the playwright, which would be a great, wonderful experience for the student actors and student crew to work with. You could say only local playwrights, maybe even in your county or in your district, and you can specify it has to have at least 6 strong female roles or 10 strong female roles. We're not interested in tech spectacle shows, can't have language, so you can kind of hone it down, and then makes it real easier to go through the scripts. But you can also go watch theater companies in your area if you're lucky enough to have a rich theater company in your area, and go see what they're doing with new plays and local playwrights, and if they did it at their theater, then maybe next season you can do it at yours.
Because there's really, I wouldn't worry much about crossover, except maybe within district. I mean, I don't really concern myself much with what other high schools are doing when selecting shows, besides what's in my district, just because there's already enough sports rivalries. We're not, okay, both schools are doing and get your gun. Who can do the best one? Yeah. Same season.
But with your professional or your amateur community theater companies around, I wouldn't worry about that either. It might be kind of fun.
So, and it's also kind of looking what you have out there. If my students were listening to the show, I will discuss my thoughts on next season. Is like I'm that close to doing a Shakespeare. If I'm not directing a musical, I'm going to select a Shakespeare.
Yeah, I'm going to put you on the spot. Be honest. How much of that decision is at all in part due to the discussions we've had on TheatreCast?
It's all to TheatreCast.
Yeah. Another one gets sucked into the bard.
Well, I've danced around it enough. It's time to jump in the game and just do it.
Good.
So now
you should note, audience, that I'm saying that, and right now I'm in a play called I Hate Hamlet.
I've done I've danced all around it.
Yeah.
I've done Kiss Me Kate. I've done Shakespeare in Hollywood. I Hate Hamlet.
We've actually
done complete works of William Shakespeare Bridge. done enough around it.
It's time. Saddle up and ride.
Yep.
Cusumano.
So if I'm not directing the musical, I'm doing Shakespeare.
Yeah,
now, what I have not decided is which one.
Ooh.
I have.
Have you decided on a romance, a tragedy, or a comedy?
No,
or
well, right now I have the 90-minute version of Midsummer and 90-minute version of Romeo and Juliet. So those are probably high up there in the running, and I'm trying to think what the kids would like.
What's your favorite bribe food? Because then the kids could start leaving that on your doorstep.
Well, I only have 3 days of school left, so. Then other ones, at least I'm thinking off the top of my head. I always have a soft spot for Taming of the Shrew because it's so much fun and physical, but I have a Kate, but I don't think I have a Petruchio, so that's probably off the list. And then Twelfth Night, they all seem to like that because she's the man. So it might be down between those three. I don't want to do the Scottish play.
It's such a great show.
Yes, but I think acting my females are slightly stronger than the males, so then that leaves.
So gender reversed. Yeah, those are good picks. Those are good picks.
If I'm doing,
and I'm sure it'll help to look at what you're doing in the rest of your season too. So.
Yeah. And so then I think we have an idea for the musical, but that one I'm not going to say because I wouldn't direct it. And if I'm directing the musical, I have no idea at this moment. So we'll just kind of. And that decision's yet to be made. And then we have the student-directed show, so that kind of comes in the mix too. So some of the things that you may want to look at when selecting a show is, are you producing a musical? Because then that takes one of your choices. How many shows are you doing? If your musical's happy, do you maybe want to do a more challenging dramatic piece to kind of balance that out? Or vice versa, if your musical you're doing Sweeney Todd, maybe you want to like something a little bit more light or comedy. But then you can have themed seasons too, and that's a whole other interesting approach. You could look at a playwright. Some playwrights out there do have vast enough experience that they've written at least the book to a musical and straight shows. So, Neil Simon comes to mind. Just be aware with Mr. Neil Simon that you must do as written now, so no more doing rumors and cutting out the
swear words, yeah.
The swear words, because you can't do it, so... because he sends the publishing house sends a nice little letter along with that. So just bear that in mind. Now, some places you can have a back and forth with the play publisher, but if you make sure it's worth the fight, and if they say no, what's your plan B? And just cutting it yourself's not going to cover you legally. Let's put it that way.
It's not a good precedent to show. No. You sure don't want that happening under your watch.
So just bear.
And I think.
And also, if you're dealing with some touchy subject matter, and you're in an educational theater situation, then 99% of the time, I'm like, this script's talking about this. I think this is a challenge for our students. I think they need to explore this. I think it shows some interesting things that they can learn from, and I think I've said before in the show, theater is a mirror of life. So sometimes you have to show the not so great side of life, so people can learn, and what's a better way to learn on stage where you're in a safe environment and you can talk about, let's not do that. You can show, if you go down this path, this is what could happen. and they learn it from that character on stage instead of in their own life.
And just practically speaking, another consideration to take in is thinking of the timing too. So the kind of show that plays during the holiday season is different than the kind of show that plays during the springtime or during right at the the first show of the year. And similarly, in educational programs, you want to think about the big sporting events that are going to make your actors compete, are going to compete with the pool that you have from your actors as well. The big school events that are going to be going on, and consider that as you create your season, because you sure don't. If your football team goes to state, assume they're going to go to state when you're putting your show together, and say, okay, well, I got to imagine I'm not going to have football players in this round, so I'm not going to have a lot of guys.
Yeah, so maybe the fall may not be the best time to do 7 Brides for 7 Brothers, because you're going to need 7 brothers to lift those girls up and to fling them around and dance and all the stuff that happens in that show. It's such a quirky show. It's yeah, so that comes in play. You can also think theme-wise. I mean, I'm sure Dracula and the Scottish plays are produced in October more than any other time in the year.
Although I've always thought that it'd be fun to do some summery show in the. I think you could sell that in the winter too. People would love it. Get out of this.
110 the shade in the winter.
Yeah, it'd be fun. Fun to do.
Yeah, I think there's just an interesting amount out there, and sometimes I really like doing those. Dracula does have an interesting pool, and if you have that, it's always kind of fun to do that around Halloween time, and people love dressing up. To me, Halloween time, I don't want to dress up. It's like it's during. I get to dress up all year, so I'm charged of finding costumes all year, so doing it now doesn't excite me. But I know other people outside of the theater, I know that's something that they like, and like weddings are a big theatrical event for people who don't do shows all year. I'm like, this is like staging a show, but much more. It's a lot more difficult figuring out a wedding than it is figuring out a show for me. It was. Preferred much more to do a show than all the.
I treated my wedding just like a show. My wedding was totally a production.
And I'm like, I'm better at doing the back part of stuff. What, I have to be up on stage now too? Or, alter, whatever you want to call it. It's one of those challenges.
Stage, alter, whatever.
It's in front of a group of people, so that means audience either way you go about it. And looking at your talent base, knowing kind of what you have, but I don't hold to that, or
there's a difference between recognizing your talent base and pre-casting, and we're not talking about pre-casting. No. You might have someone you think, I bet she's going to be great, but then at auditions, I think you really have to let that go, and just.
And I think part of that's just like, okay, I have more girls than guys. Well, then I need to pick a more girl-heavy show.
Yeah.
To come into play than other, because one, they can always surprise you.
Yeah.
Because one, I've loved being surprised, and it's great when that happens, and I've also been through the point I'm like, this might be a good show, and this person might be good for that role, and then they either don't take it, they don't audition, or
they have trouble with
or they move or something, whatever.
Yeah, there are all kinds of things that can happen. They get an injury, they have trouble with their grades, mom and dad say, no, you can't do anything because you were a bad kid at some point.
So I just don't pick a show just for a person.
Right.
Or one single person,
And I think
that person could be good at that, but it's more how you guys and girls distribute it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
well, and the size of your students, and if you have a bunch of kids who are interested in Shakespeare, for instance, or a faction of kids who are more your musical theater type, or kids who are more into moaning and groaning at the floor, or whatever. And in fact, you want to think about that too. That don't think about building your whole season for one talent group or talent pool, but to think, like, you don't want to do, say, Fiddler and Seven Brides for Seven Brothers in the same season, because you're looking at the same male talent essentially there. That instead you want to think about, okay, this is for that kind of niche of kids, and this is for a different niche of kids. So you want to think about that as well. That you probably have different sort of chunks of kids who need to be served by the season you choose.
Yeah, and when thinking of musicals too, is I always look at it as, how is this going to use a chorus? And if I can, I will pick a show that uses the chorus well, because that provides memories, opportunities, fun, and I like to have more people involved. I will say, this year I picked Into the Woods. I had, you could count 4 people as my chorus, and I never do that. It was a slight adjustment to that for me. But I think, and there's been some shows I've wanted to do, and I'm like, but it doesn't use the chorus well, and is this the story we need to tell? And how many kids do I have involved in the program who really want to be in the show? And so it's just that back and forth and balance, and so and I would say after doing Into the Woods, we're looking probably a bigger.
I think that's true with.
Course, well, what were you gonna say, Danielle?
Right, and I think too, yeah. That you also want to think about. If I do a tech-heavy show. Do a big costume show. The next one is not a big costume show, or is very sort of slimmed down version of it. I always thought it'd be fun to do like Hamlet, and then Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, and I hate Hamlet. I think that would be super fun if you wanted to do that too. But
yeah, I think.
Sorry, I think I cut out for a second.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, and
your last word there, because you.
Go ahead.
What was the word you were going to say before you cut out? It was, I think, and then you cut out.
No. I think I've got a little lag going too. I think that in a sense, the same rules apply to amateur and community theater companies as well. I wish they'd think more that way, but educational theater has a different onus, where it's not really butts and seats. It is. Of course, you want that, and you have to think about, like, you couldn't do Hamlet Machine because nobody would come see it. But to think about instead what food you're feeding, what theatrical food you're feeding your students. I wish more theater teachers and educational theater program managers would talk with, say, language arts teachers, social studies teachers, and say, hey, what are you reading this year? What are you studying this year? And see if you could get some things synced up and
some more interdisciplinary. Yeah, I mean, that's what Romeo and Juliet is kind of up there, because they all have to read that. I'm not going to do Julius Caesar, even though they have to read that one. It's far too many men.
Unless you flip the gender and it's Julie Caesar.
And that is an idea.
We did that at Village. Rick Clark, friend of the show, did that at Village.
And I will think upon that. But and I'm slightly more partial to comedies, at least in my head right now. I do it. Though, I mean, Romeo and Juliet, I think it would pull people out of the woodwork because it's just
and it has so many comic elements. Romeo and Juliet does so many.
So, and you know, it's just finding that decision and making it and seeing if that's the right choice for the group. And I have to read through those 90-minute Shakespeares to see. And Midsummer is also a whole lot of fun.
And that's a nice big cast with where in Romeo and Juliet there are 2 or like 4 really strong roles, and maybe 1.5 for women. Midsummer has several big parts in it, because you've got the whole faction of the mechanicals and the
mechanicals, you don't have to stick with gender right there.
No, and the fairies. I myself have played Peter Quince.
Yep. And Puck and all those type of fun things, and Titania and Oberon, and so that one lays up there too. And then there's a lot of fun stuff in Twelfth Night, and really. You show off your ladies there too with that one. Viola and Malvolio pops in my head as a fun comic character to do, and Olivia.
It's a fun show, yeah.
So that's, but I'm probably still tied down to those 3. So it's just an interesting.
I don't think you can go wrong. It's impossible to make a wrong decision.
So it should be fun. So it's just seeing what kind of works, and if you can, maybe over like a 4-year thing. Some places do this, some schools especially on the collegiate level, so that a graduate can get the full gamut. That somewhere in that 4-year time they have a big, like Rodgers and Hammerstein musical, then they have like more, maybe something like Rent, and then they have a teeny tiny one, maybe Little Shop, and then an avant-garde one or a review, and then with straight shows you're looking contemporary works, classical works, styles, so comedy of manners, absurdist, Ionesco, Ibsen, all those kind of mix in there, so you can service that to your students, and if you can have that nice mix, it's, I think, when it comes pre-professional training is to get a whole variety, because 1, you don't know what you're going to do out there, and 2, if you have exposure to it, then it's not as scary when you go to jump in or audition for something.
Yeah, I think that's all really good advice, and hopefully stuff your kids are going to like. That they're enthusiastic about. I don't think it's a bad thing to be listening to them and their conversations and what they're into as far as it goes. And it's not a bad idea to look for what's happening in the world. They did Julius Caesar right around election time. This is perfect, right? And pieces that question war when we were engaging with the post 9/11 conflicts that we had. It's on their minds, and engaging them in a way that makes them invite students to make connections with the world around them. And I think that there's so much room to do that, especially with Shakespeare. And his sort of timelessness. It's not enough to just say, I'm going to do Shakespeare, I'm going to do the Scottish play, but to go ahead and take a stand, take an interesting insight into it into that, and maybe I'm going to do it. My soldiers are going to be in desert fatigues. Maybe I'm going to really play that part of it up because that's what's happening in the world right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some really interesting videos on the Royal National Theatre's website about their production of Antigone. Not so Shakespeare, but in Richard III and his definite take on that and incorporating what was happening in our current world and using that as inspiration for some of the costume choices and other choices, technical and design choices. That's the word I'm looking for that they made.
And if you get your students involved with that part of it, if you invite them in and say, this is the vision I have, then that really gets them going to think about the design aspects and take it out of, oh, Shakespeare has to be in ruffled colors and tights sort of mindset that so many people have. Excuse me. I got all choked up.
So, are there any last parting remarks we want to help people with their season?
Oh, that's such a good question. For you, when does that decision usually? What's your deadline for making a decision?
Well, ideally May, but that has not happened the past couple of years.
May-ish.
Ideally before we go into the school year is just so they can get excited about it and do their summer research and download the songs and read the book and whatever it may be.
Yeah, get them excited about it. I love that back when I worked for the Chicago Academy for the Arts in Chicago. Hi, guys. When I worked back there, and they still do it. Andy Robinson is teaching there right now in the musical theater department, and CW is is the head of the theater department itself, and they just make such a big deal and a big fanfare about announcing the season. They do some fun sort of almost inner marketing things. Their Facebook page, they have a week of just dropping hints about what the musical is going to be or what the big season is going to be, and they get a conversation started with the students, and they're all guessing, and they're having so much fun with it, and then by the time it's announced, it's a big party and a big sort of exciting deal. And I love that engagement, and I think so much of teaching theater and starting and getting an educational theater program and community theater too is being a cheerleader for the craft and for the art itself and getting them to be enthusiastic about it. It's called a play for a reason, and to get that sense of excitement about whatever it is, whatever the season is that you pick. I guess that would be my parting advice: is get them excited about it and think about how you release that information.
Yeah, that's a fun approach to it, and we'll see if any of them come up to me this week. Because I surprised them. We were having a meeting. They're like, and talking about Twitter, and all of a sudden I said, I have 800 and blah blah followers. They're like, Kusa, you're on Twitter? I'm like, yep.
And my students are like, Miss Filas, Twitter is so like nobody uses that anymore. So now Twitter is the old people one.
No, I thought that was Facebook.
Well, Facebook is MySpace. I think as adults infiltrate social media, they abandon camp and go set up a new one. Now it's Instagram. They're all on Instagram and
Snapchat.
Well, that's Snapchat.
I don't get that one. But anyway, we want to thank everyone for joining us this week, and remind you to check out all the stuff that's on edreach.us. follow them and us on Twitter. And if you have any exciting stories you want to share with us, questions you want to ask us,
shows you'd like to see,
shows you'd like to see, your thoughts of what I should do at my school. Tell me on a show, have at it.
You're being very Hamlet-esque about this.
Go ahead and send us an email at theatrecast@edreach.us, and both of us will get a copy of that email. We'd love to hear from you. If you have a story you want to tell us, think you make a great guest on the show, please let us know, and we'd love to hear your story and share it with the world. And as always, find us on the web, and we will see you next week. Ciao.
Bye.
Oh, wrong one.